You've seen this place 1,000 times, and somehow you've never actually seen it. The overwater villa, the private white sand, the most photographed honeymoon on the planet. But that island belongs to a tourist. The real Maldives is 500,000 people on the lowest, flattest land on Earth, barely a meter above a sea that may one day rise to take it. And in a few minutes, we'll stand on an island this nation built out of the ocean floor, on purpose, just to give its people somewhere higher to stand. This is the Maldives. So come with us, away from the resort jetty, past the seaplanes lined up on their floats, out to the country that actually lives here. Because the first surprising thing about the Maldives is how little of it is land at all. Picture a nation that is almost entirely ocean. The Maldives is a chain of 1,192 coral islands, grouped into 26 atolls, strung out for nearly 500 miles down the Indian Ocean, southwest of Sri Lanka. That sounds enormous, and the stretch of sea it covers is roughly 90,000 square kilometers, about the size of the state of Maine. But the actual land, every island added together, comes to just 298 square kilometers, around 115 square miles. If you gathered up all 1,192 of these islands and set them side by side, the whole country would be smaller than a single mid-sized American city. Floating in an ocean the size of a state, 99% of the Maldives is water, and only that last 1% is dry land. It makes this one of the most spread out countries on the planet, a nation you could never really see all at once. Coming in from the air, it looks like a string of pearls scattered across blue glass. Little rings and teardrops of white and green, each one circled by a halo of impossibly bright turquoise, where the shallow water sits over the reef. Most people arrive the same way: a flight into the main airport, then a speedboat or a tiny seaplane skimming low over that turquoise toward wherever they're staying. That first flight in is when the scale really hits you, all that ocean, and the little scraps of land almost lost in it. And that word you keep hearing, atoll, the ring shape that makes up each of these clusters, is one of the very few words the English language borrowed straight from Devehi, the Maldivian tongue. The Maldives lived on atolls for 1,000 years, and it's the reason the rest of us even have the word for them. Before we go any further, we'd love to know where in the world you're watching this from. Drop your city in the comments below. We read them, and honestly, half the joy of a place this remote is seeing how far it reaches. Now settle in. This next part changes how you'll see everything else in this film. The Maldives wasn't pushed up out of the sea by mountains the way most land is. Not exactly. Deep beneath these islands, there once stood volcanoes, ancient ones, slowly sinking back down into the ocean across millions of years. And as they sank, living coral grew upward on top of them, always reaching for the sunlight near the surface, building reef on top of old reef, on top of older reef. So the ground under your feet in the Maldives isn't granite or bedrock, it's coral, all the way down. These islands are the slow, patient work of tiny animals, too small to see, stacked up over a span of time the human mind can barely hold. The naturalist who first worked out that coral could raise whole islands on top of drowning volcanoes was Charles Darwin, back in the 1800s, and it turned out he was right. And these islands are still being built and unbuilt, even now. The coral keeps growing. Storms and currents push sand from one end of an island to the other, so that over the years the shapes of them shift, new sandbanks surface, and old ones slip quietly back under. The Maldives isn't some finished thing sitting on top of the ocean. It's a living, moving edge between the reef and the sea, and it has always depended on the coral underneath it, staying alive. Being made of coral shapes everything about life here. There are no rivers in the Maldives, no streams, no mountains to catch the rain. The soil is thin and salty. Fresh water has always been precious, and that one thread runs right through the country's whole story, as we'll see. But the biggest consequence of all is height. Because it's built from coral rather than rock, the Maldives sits impossibly low. The average natural ground across the country is about 1.5 meters above the sea, roughly 5 feet. And the single highest natural point in the entire nation, the tallest piece of solid ground in a country of 500,000 people, sits on a small island down in the far southern Adu Atoll, and it rises to about 2.4 meters. That's under 8 feet. The highest natural ground in the whole Maldives wouldn't even reach the rim of a basketball hoop. No country anywhere on the planet has a lower high point than this one. If you're already finding this as strange and beautiful as we are, tap the like button. It really does help this kind of slow, quiet travel film reach the people who would love it. You feel that low ceiling most in the memory of one December morning in 2004. When the tsunami came racing across the Indian Ocean, most coastlines had somewhere to run. Hills, cliffs, higher streets. The Maldives had almost none. In places, the waves simply washed straight over whole islands, in one side and out the other, because there was nothing tall enough to stand in its way. Whole communities were swept through in minutes, and the country lost people it is still remembering today. It was the hardest lesson imaginable in what it means to live 1 meter above the sea. And it's the reason so much of what this nation has done since keeps circling back to one question. How do you hold your ground when your ground is barely above the water? To see how the Maldives actually answers that, you don't go to a resort. You go to Malé. Malé is the capital, and it's unlike almost any capital on Earth. Imagine an island so small you could walk from one side to the other in under half an hour, ringed on every side by open ocean. Now put nearly 200,000 people on it. Roughly 1/3 of the entire country lives on this one island, a patch of land under 2 square kilometers, packed wall to wall, with high-rises, mosques, and shops, with tens of thousands of motorbikes weaving through streets barely wide enough for a single car. There's no room for a resort here. There's barely any beach. In fact, there wasn't even room for the airport. The main runway sits on a separate island next door, because Malé itself couldn't spare the space. This is one of the most densely populated islands anywhere in the world, more tightly packed, square kilometer for square kilometer, than Manhattan. When the island ran out of room, the city did the only 2 things it could. It grew straight up into towers, and then it grew outward, dredging brand new land right out of the lagoon, because there was simply nowhere else to go. Stand in the middle of it, and the postcard feels like another planet. This is the Maldives most tourists never even glimpse. Down at the waterfront, the fish market runs hot in the mornings, whole skipjack tuna laid out in glistening rows, traders calling prices over each other, the smell of salt and diesel and the sea. Cafes spill onto the pavement. Kids in school uniforms pour out of gates. The call to prayer rolls across the rooftops 5 times a day from a grand golden domed mosque that's one of the largest in the region. Life here is stacked vertically, family above shop, because there's no other direction left to build. For all that crush, though, there's an intimacy to Malé. Down by the harbor sits a rare open square of green, the national flag snapping over it, rows of donuts nudging the wall. Nothing is far from anything. There are no long commutes, no room for them. People know their neighbors, their shopkeepers, the man who pours their morning tea. It has the closeness of a small town that just happens to be stacked 10 stories high. But that closeness cuts both ways, because when the ocean rises, or a wave comes, or the water runs short, it comes for everyone here at once. Which is why, living this low and this exposed, the Maldives has quietly become very, very good at one thing: engineering its own survival. Look at the very edge of Malé, and you'll see the first sign of it. Thousands of strange concrete shapes, 4-legged and interlocking, heaped all around the island like a giant's jacks. They're called tetrapods, and they exist for a single reason: to break the force of the waves before those waves ever reach the city. People here sometimes call that ring of concrete the Great Wall of Malé. It runs for around 6 kilometers, the whole way around the island, and it was built over roughly 15 years with grant aid from Japan. Finished just a couple of years before it was ever truly tested, because when the 2004 tsunami struck, most low islands had nothing to stop the water. Malé had this wall, and on the capital, that ring of tetrapods is credited with holding the ocean back so well that not a single life was lost there, even as the same wave devastated islands close by. For a city barely above the waves, that wall of concrete made all the difference. But concrete can only hold a line. It can't make new ground. And the Maldives needed new ground, land that was safer and sat higher. So the country did something that still sounds like science fiction the moment you say it out loud. It built an island from scratch. A few minutes by boat from the capital, dredgers pumped millions of tons of sand up off the seafloor and piled it onto a shallow coral platform until a brand new island slowly rose out of the lagoon. They called it Hulhumalé. The Dutch have used the same basic trick for centuries to make farmland out of the sea. Here, the goal was somewhere higher and safer for people to live. And here's the part that matters most. They built it higher on purpose. Hulhumalé was raised roughly 2 meters above the sea, taller than Old Malé, deliberately so that as the ocean creeps upward over the coming decades, there's somewhere for people to live that stays dry a little longer. Tens of thousands already call it home, connected back to the capital by a bridge across the water, and the plan is for it to eventually hold even more people than Old Malé does. Maldivians have a name for it that tells you everything about why it exists. They call it the City of Hope. Sit with the ambition in that for a second. A country a meter above the sea, staring at the very water that threatens it, and answering by reaching all the way down to the ocean floor and building itself higher. You get one last reminder of how thin the margins are here from a single day in December 2014, when a fire broke out at the plant that turns seawater into drinking water for the capital. Within hours, an island of well over 100,000 people had almost no clean water at all. Ships and planes from neighboring countries raced bottled water across the ocean, while the whole city waited in line. On most of the planet, water simply arrives out of a tap, without a thought. Here, fresh water is manufactured every single day, and everyone on the island knows exactly how fragile that lifeline is. For all the concrete and the engineering, though, the true center of Maldivian life was never on land. It's out on the water, and it always has been. Go down to any harbor before sunrise, and you'll hear it long before you see it. The low, patient chug of a dhonie. The dhonie is the curved wooden boat you'll spot everywhere in the Maldives. And it's hard to overstate what it means to this country. In a nation with no roads running between islands, the dhonie is the road. It's the school bus, the ambulance, the delivery truck, and the fishing fleet, all in a single hull. For 1,000 years, the shape has barely changed for the simple reason that it already worked. And what those boats mostly head out for, in the dark, is tuna. Not with the vast nets that industrial fishing uses almost everywhere else on Earth. In the Maldives, tuna is still caught the old way, one fish at a time, by pole and line. The crew scatters live bait across the surface, the water erupts as the tuna boil up into a feeding frenzy, and the fishermen swing them aboard, one by one, hook by hook, all morning long. It's slow, it's brutally hard work, and it's about as sustainable as ocean fishing gets. Because you only ever take the fish on your own line and nothing else. Set that against a single industrial trawler dragging up everything in its path, and you understand why the Maldives is quietly proud of doing it by hand. Skipjack tuna caught like this, then boiled and smoked and dried into a hard block the Maldivians call Maldive fish, has fed this country for centuries. It kept for months, which mattered in a place where the monsoon could keep the boats ashore for days. When the traveler Ibn Battuta passed through in the 14th century, he wrote about Maldivian smoked tuna. Even then, the same food, prepared much the same way, 700 years ago. Today, it's still the backbone of the national diet. And after tourism, fish is still the country's biggest export. You taste all that history at breakfast. The classic Maldivian morning is mas huni, shredded smoked tuna, tossed with grated coconut, onion, and chili, then scooped up with a warm flatbread called roshi. Later in the day, it might be garudia, a clear, fragrant tuna broth spooned over rice. Tuna and coconut, the sea and the palm tree, the two things these islands have always had in real abundance. The coconut palm alone gives food, oil, rope, timber, and shade. And out in those same waters glide some of the ocean's giants, manta rays and gentle whale sharks drifting through the atolls. The reason divers travel halfway around the world to slip into this particular sea. By late afternoon, the dawn has come back in, riding low in the water, and the day's catch is hauled up onto the quay to be weighed, split, and shared around. On a small island, almost everyone has a hand in it somewhere. Someone fishing, someone cleaning, someone laying the tuna out to dry on racks in the sun. Filling the air with that particular salt and smoke smell that says the Maldives more than any perfume ever could. Very little goes to waste, because out here, this far from anywhere, it never really could. And no afternoon here is complete without tea. Step into any local cafe late in the day, and you'll find the tables covered in what Maldivians call short eats, little fried parcels of tuna and coconut, spiced fish cakes, crispy savory snacks, all washed down with sweet milky tea while friends talk the heat of the day away. It's the social heartbeat of a local island, and it costs almost nothing. Sit down at one of those tables with a glass of tea, and for a little while, you stop being a tourist at all. It's a life built almost entirely from fish and palm and reef. And once you've tasted it, looking out over a lagoon, you understand it completely. Which brings us to the strangest thing about this whole country, the gap between the Maldives the world visits and the Maldives that actually lives here. And it isn't an accident. It was designed. Back in 1972, when tourism first arrived, the Maldives made a choice that shaped everything that came after. One island, one resort. A resort here doesn't sit inside a town or share its beach with a village. It gets an entire private island all to itself. What one island, one resort means in practice is this. You land at the airport near Malé, you step straight onto a speedboat or a little seaplane, and you're carried off to a private island where the only locals you will ever meet are the ones bringing you drinks. You can spend a full week here, a genuinely beautiful, unforgettable week, and never once set foot in the actual country. Never walk through Malé, never meet a Maldivian family in their home. There are now more than 130 of these resort islands, and each one is its own sealed little world. And that world is enormous business. More than 1.5 million tourists fly into the Maldives every year, far more visitors than the country has citizens, and tourism brings in the lion's share of the national income. The whole economy floats on those private islands, which is exactly why so much depends on the people who build them, clean them, cook in them, and keep them running, most of whom a guest will never see. Because on that resort world, the rules are different too. The Maldives is a conservative Muslim country. On the inhabited local islands, alcohol isn't sold at all. Modest dress is expected, and daily life runs to the rhythm of the 5 prayers. But step onto a resort island and the bar is open, the wine list is long, and the bikini is out on the sand. The country runs 2 sets of rules at the same time, one for the tourist bubble and one for everyone else. Alcohol flows freely on one island, while a dry, devout nation lives a speedboat away. And there's a third group woven all through this, The people who keep the paradise running and almost never appear in a single photograph. Of the roughly 500,000 people living in the Maldives, more than a quarter aren't Maldivian at all. They're migrant workers, many of them from Bangladesh and India, and they carry a huge share of the construction, the service, and the hard, largely invisible labor that holds a resort economy up. This is worth being exact about. When you hear 500,000 people, that number includes the migrant workforce. The Maldivian citizens themselves, the Dive people whose home this actually is, number closer to 380,000. A resort brochure will never once mention that. But you can't really understand this country without it. None of this is a scandal exactly. It's how a tiny, devout nation chose to throw its doors open to the world's tourists without letting two very different ways of life dissolve into each other. And in the last decade or so, a door has finally opened in that wall. Guest houses have started appearing on the inhabited local islands. Small, simple, family-run, which means an ordinary traveler can now stay in a real Maldivian community, eat where locals eat, and take the public ferry between islands. It's still a small slice of the tourism here, but it's the first real crack in the glass between the two Maldives, because the country everyone thinks they know is a kind of gorgeous stage set. The real one is right there, just offshore, and it's far more interesting. If you're enjoying this walk through the real Maldives, take a moment to subscribe. We put out a deep dive like this on one remarkable place every single week, and there's a whole world of them still to see. Now, let's go and meet that real country. Step off the ferry onto an inhabited local island, and the pace changes the moment your feet touch the sand. The streets are often literally sand, soft and white, shaded by palms and breadfruit trees. Bikes lean against coral stone walls. Somewhere, a boat engine is being fixed. The whole island runs on the rhythm of the sea and the 5 daily prayers, and when the call goes up from the mosque, the shops pause and the streets quiet for a while. Kids play football on the harbor front until it's too dark to see the ball. Everyone knows everyone. There's no traffic to speak of, no rush, and the horizon is never more than a few streets away in any direction. No resort brochure has a photo of this. But it's the Maldives the people who live here would just call home. And their story runs a great deal deeper than the last 50 years of tourism. The Maldives has been inhabited for well over 2,500 years, and it has spent almost all of that time sitting at the crossroads of the Indian Ocean. Arab traders were writing about these islands more than 1,000 years ago, sailing in on the monsoon winds, and it was through those trade routes that the country's whole history turned. Before Islam arrived, these islands were Buddhist, and archaeologists still turn up the traces, old mounds and ruined stupas, quietly buried under later centuries of life. Then, in the 12th century, around the year 1153, the last Buddhist king converted to Islam, and the Maldives has been a Muslim nation ever since. So there's a hidden layer beneath the whole country, centuries of Buddhism resting under the faith that came after. And here's the fact, almost nobody knows about this place. For hundreds of years, these tiny islands were, in a sense, the mint of the world. The warm shallows of the southern atolls were full of a small sea snail called the cowrie, and its glossy little shell became the first truly global currency. Cowries gathered here were counted out as money across India, across Southeast Asia, deep into West Africa, even into parts of Europe. When that same traveler recorded the cowrie trade in the 14th century, he wrote of ships leaving these islands loaded with shells by the millions, and the gathering of them, wading out into the shallows to collect them by hand, was mostly done by Maldivian women. This speck of a nation that so much of the world has never really looked at twice once helped run the global economy straight out of its own lagoons. And he ended up staying too. The islands were so short of judges who knew Islamic law that they more or less kept him. And he served for a while as the chief judge of the Maldives married into a leading family, and got thoroughly tangled up in local politics before he finally left. For most of its history after that, the Maldives was ruled by its own sultans, a line of kings stretching back centuries. Later, it became a British protectorate, though never quite a full colony, and it won its complete independence in 1965, becoming a republic a few years afterward. Through all of it, the islands kept their own crafts alive: rope twisted from coconut husk, black and red lacquered boxes turned and painted by hand, and sleeping mats woven from local reeds, so fine they were once sent to sultans as gifts. These are small islands, but they didn't borrow their culture ready-made from anyone. Most of it, they made themselves, right here. You can still hear how singular this place is the moment anyone speaks. Maldivians speak Divehi, and they write it in a script all their own called Tana, which runs right to left across the page and is used almost nowhere else on Earth. And at night, especially at a celebration, you'll hear the other heartbeat of the culture, Bodu Beru. Big drums played fast and hard, hands blurring, a whole crowd clapping and swaying as the rhythm climbs and climbs. It's the sound of a seafaring people, folks who have been crossing this ocean, trading across it, and steering their donuts home to these islands for a very, very long time. And that long history is exactly what makes the last chapter of this story weigh so much. Because this nation, the one that spent 2,500 years learning to live on a meter of coral, is now the country the whole world points to when it talks about a rising sea. The Maldives contributes almost nothing to the problem. Its slice of global emissions is barely a rounding error. But because it sits so impossibly low, it stands to lose more, and sooner, than almost anywhere else on Earth. For years now, the Maldives has been widely described as one of the first nations that could be made unlivable by rising seas. That's a projection, not a prophecy, and it's worth handling with real care. But it isn't only something outsiders say about the Maldives. It's something the Maldivian government itself openly plans around. And the way this country has faced that down is honestly extraordinary. In 2009, the president at the time, Mohammed Nasheed, did something no world leader had ever done. He held a cabinet meeting underwater, his ministers in scuba gear, seated at desks down on the sea floor, signing a document that called on the world to cut its emissions. It was pure theater, and it knew it, and it worked. Overnight, the image went everywhere, and this tiny country became the face of the entire climate conversation. Nasheed even floated an idea that sounded almost unthinkable when he first said it out loud, that the Maldives might one day set money aside to buy land in another country, so there would be somewhere for all Maldivians to go, together as a whole people, if it ever came to that. But the mood here isn't surrender, and that's the part the doom headlines always miss. The Maldives isn't packing to leave, it's digging in. You can see it in Hulhumalé, that raised, reclaimed city of hope. And you can see it in the plan they're chasing next, which sounds almost as wild as building an island did. A floating city, it's a real project, already taking shape in a lagoon near the capital, designed with Dutch engineers as a grid of hexagonal platforms laid out in the pattern of a brain coral, meant to hold something like 20,000 people. The whole city is built to rest on the surface of the water and lift gently with the sea as it rises, year after year, so the ground it stands on can never be swallowed. It's the same instinct that raised Hulhumalé, pushed one step further, right out onto the open water. And here's what's easy to lose under all the talk of engineering and risk. The thing they are fighting so hard to hold on to is genuinely one of the most beautiful places on this entire planet. On certain nights, on beaches like the one on the island of Vadu, the shallows themselves begin to glow. Tiny plankton in the water light up a brilliant electric blue wherever a wave or a footstep stirs them, so the edge of the sea turns into a field of cold blue stars, and people here call it the Sea of Stars. That is the kind of thing this country is fighting to keep. A real beach on a real night, glowing like the sky above it. And the Maldives' real first line of defense against the ocean was never the concrete anyway. It's the coral. A living, healthy reef grows a little every year. It breaks the waves before they ever arrive. And unlike a seawall, it can heal and rebuild itself. The reef is the nation's natural levee, and it's alive. But it's also fragile. Back in 2016, a spike in ocean heat bleached and killed more than half of the country's coral reefs, a hard reminder that the thing protecting these islands is a living creature that can be lost. And the reef does far more than hold back the waves. It gives the Maldives that impossible blue water, the fish the country lives on, and the coral gardens the divers fly across the world to see. Protect the reef, and you protect the coastline, the food, and the whole visiting economy in one stroke. Which is why, in the end, so much of the fight for the future of the Maldives is really a fight for the reef itself. And for the people who live here, none of this is a headline. It's the ground under their children's feet. Ask a young Maldivian whether they'd ever leave, and most will tell you the same thing. This is home, and they intend to stay. That's the quiet heart of the whole story. These aren't people waiting to drown. They looked at the hardest odds imaginable and decided to build, to adapt, and to hold on. The sea made these islands, and the Maldivians have spent their entire history learning to live with it, and lately, to rise along with it. So if all of this makes you want to go and see the real Maldives for yourself, and we very much hope it does, here's the honest version of how to do it. The dry season, roughly November through April, brings the calmest seas and the clearest water, and it's the classic time to come. Whenever you arrive, you'll land near Malé, at the airport island just across the water from the capital, and from there, almost everything is a boat ride. This is the moment where you get to make a choice most visitors don't even realize they have. You can do the resort, the private island, the overwater villa, and it will be every bit as gorgeous as promised. But you can also stay on an inhabited local island, in one of those simple guest houses, inside a real community, traveling on a public ferry budget instead of a seaplane one. More and more people now do both. A few nights actually meet in the country, a few nights out on a resort. That combination, quietly, is the richest way to see this place. One honest note before you pack a bag: this film is a portrait made for wonder and curiosity, not a travel or safety guide. Out on the local islands, you're a guest in a conservative Muslim community, and the rules there, around dress, around alcohol, around custom, are genuinely different from the anything-goes world of the resorts. So read up before you go, travel respectfully, and check the current details for yourself, because things do change. Come to the Maldives as a guest, and it opens up in a way no resort brochure could ever promise. Because in the end, that's the thing that stays with you about the Maldives, long after the water and the light. Strip away the villas and the drone shots, and what's left is one of the most quietly astonishing decisions people have ever made. 500,000 of them chose to build a whole life on top of a meter of coral in the middle of the open ocean. A language of their own, a faith, 1,000 years of trade and seafaring and history. They fish these waters by hand, they pray 5 times a day, and they raise their children on islands you could walk across in an hour. And when the very sea that made this place began to threaten it, they didn't leave. They set about building the country higher and learning how to float, deciding against all logic that this fragile, glowing, impossible sliver of a place was worth holding on to. For one more generation, and then the one after that. That's the real Maldives, the country standing behind the postcard. The Maldivians have a lovely word that means both goodbye and thank you, shukriya. And they have their own name for this place they refuse to let go of. Divehi Raje. Shukriya for spending this time out here with us. Now tell us, down in the comments, where in the world should we take you next?